She thought she was just marrying a billionaire to save her family, but Liana Wren had no idea she was stepping into a house built on lies, betrayal, and a tragic secret. When her husband falls into a coma after a mysterious crash, Liana uncovers a truth that could clear her late father's name or destroy everything. Who really betrayed whom? And can love survive a contract born from revenge? This story will pull you in, twist your heart, and leave you breathless. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable stories. The rain struck the windows of Crescent Ridge Academy in steady, unrelenting waves as Liana Wren hurried through the quiet halls, soaked sheet music pressed tightly to her chest. Her coat clung to her legs, and her shoes left a trail of water along the polished tile floor. She was late for her final class of the day, the only thing that had kept her focused since the sleepless night before. But just as she reached for the classroom door, her phone buzzed in her pocket. An unknown number. She almost ignored it. Almost. Miss Wren? The voice on the other end was professional but hesitant. This is St. Augustine Medical Center. Your father, he suffered a major stroke. You need to come. Immediately, her body went still. The sheet music slipped from her arms and floated down like broken wings. 20 minutes later, Liana sat motionless in a too-bright hospital corridor that smelled of antiseptic and despair. A doctor with weary eyes and a clipboard approached her with the kind of face that made words unnecessary. But he said them anyway. I'm sorry. Your father was gone before the ambulance arrived. There was nothing we could do. 3 days later, Liana stood beneath a slate-gray sky as the wind swept through Briar Hill Cemetery, clutching the sleeve of her mother Evelyn's coat. Evelyn's hands, weakened by the tremors of early-onset Parkinson's, wrapped tightly around her cane. Her brother Noah, barely 19, stared hollow-eyed at their father's casket as it descended into the wet earth. The words of the minister faded into the sound of wind in the trees, and then Liana saw him, a man, distant, watching. He stood apart from the mourners, tall, striking, dressed in a black coat tailored to precision. His features were sharp, unreadable. When Liana turned her head to get a better look, he was already walking away, disappearing into a sleek black car before she could speak a word. A week after the funeral, reality came crashing down with brutal indifference. 2 men in gray suits appeared at the Wren family's modest home, their briefcases bulging with documents. One introduced himself as a legal representative of Cole Enterprises. The other wasted no time. Your father owed Mr. Damien Cole $9 million, he said, placing the contract on their worn kitchen table. The debt is now due in full. Evelyn's hand trembled so hard she knocked over a mug. That's impossible, she whispered. Isaac would never. Mr. Wren falsified corporate financials, the second lawyer said crisply. We have documented proof. His actions directly affected investment portfolios tied to medical research. The implications were severe. Liana stared at the paperwork, her heart pounding. The legal jargon blurred before her eyes. Medical bills for her mother were already swallowing their savings, and Noah had just started pre-med on a scholarship that barely covered housing. They were teetering on the edge. There's no way we can pay that, she said, her voice steady, though she felt herself crumbling inside. The older lawyer nodded. Mr. Cole anticipated this. He's prepared to offer an alternative resolution. He slid a second folder across the table. It was thicker, bound, and bore no legal firm's seal. Liana opened it. Her blood ran cold. Marriage. 1 year. No early termination. After that, the debt is considered repaid. Mr. Cole will also cover your mother's medical expenses and your brother's tuition in full. Why would he want this? She asked, her voice barely audible. The men exchanged glances. His motivations are not our concern. After they left, Evelyn wept, begging her daughter to find another way. But they both knew the truth. The house was mortgaged to the brink. Evelyn's treatment was becoming harder to afford each month. Noah's future depended on more than good intentions. I'll be okay, Mom, Liana whispered, brushing hair from her mother's face. It's just a year. The next morning, she dialed the number they left behind. By afternoon, the papers were signed. By evening, she stood at her father's grave in the cold, wind teasing her curls, whispering to the marble headstone. Why, Dad? She asked the stone. What did you do? The crunch of tires on gravel made her turn. A black limousine approached, the rear window sliding down just enough for her to catch a glimpse of pale eyes, gray-green and unblinking, sharp with calculation. Damien Cole, the man who now owned her future. The window rolled up again, and the car waited. The drive to Damien Cole's estate was long and winding, leading Liana through towering redwoods and mist-covered valleys until the car finally emerged onto a wide, private road carved into the cliffs of Lake Revel. The rain had slowed, but the clouds remained heavy and brooding, casting a silvery sheen over the landscape. When the iron gates parted and the mansion came into view, she couldn't help but draw in a sharp breath. It didn't look like a home. It looked like a fortress of glass and stone, impossibly modern, perched over the lake like a throne of power and isolation. The chauffeur said nothing as he opened the door. Liana stepped out, the crisp mountain air biting her cheeks as she stared up at the towering structure that now served as her prison. Inside, the house was as cold as its owner. Sleek steel fixtures, glass walls, minimalist furniture, every room felt curated for a magazine spread, not for living. A woman appeared at the entrance hall before Liana had a chance to gather her bearings. She was tall, poised, and dressed in a tailored gray suit with not a hair out of place. Clara Voss, the woman said with a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. Mr. Cole's executive assistant. I'll be helping you settle in. Helping. That was generous. Clara led her through the vast corridors of the mansion, each step echoing off polished concrete floors. You'll have the east wing. Mr. Cole resides in the west. Meals will be served in the main dining hall at 7 sharp, but you're free to dine elsewhere if preferred. So we're just roommates? Liana asked, her voice dry. Clara's lips twitched at the corners. Let's just say, appearances matter, Mrs. Cole. The suite she was shown to was breathtaking in its detachment. A wall of windows opened to a panoramic view of the lake. The furniture was elegant, distant, cool in palette. On the bed lay a pale ivory nightgown, silk, expensive, and still with the tags attached. Something about it made Liana's stomach turn. Clara closed the door behind her with a click that echoed like a verdict. Alone, Liana peeled off her coat and stared at her reflection in the glass. Who was this woman? A teacher just days ago, clinging to sheet music and dreams. Now married to a man she hadn't exchanged 10 words with. Her name changed, her life sold for security. Dinner arrived like a performance. Liana descended the grand staircase to find Damien already seated at the head of a long, empty dining table meant for 20. He barely looked up from his tablet, murmuring something about markets and mergers between bites of seared duck. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken terms. Is this how it'll always be? She asked finally, setting her fork down with a quiet clink. Silent meals and polite nods across a 20-foot table? He didn't glance up. You're free to eat in your suite. How generous, she muttered. His gaze flicked to her then, sharp and unreadable. Did you expect candlelight and conversation, Liana? I expected basic courtesy, and I'm keeping my name. As you wish, but publicly, you'll be addressed as Mrs. Cole. It's in the contract. The mention of the contract tightened something in her chest. After dinner, Damien stood, smoothed his suit, and said, I have calls to make. Clara will show you back. But it was not Clara who knocked on her door that night. At nearly 11, the sound of footsteps in the hall sent adrenaline coursing through her veins. A soft knock. Then the door opened. Damien stood there, his tie gone, shirt collar undone, and for the first time, something human showed in the lines of his face. May I come in? Liana nodded, unable to find her voice. He entered slowly, as if aware of the tension stretching between them like wire. You're afraid, he observed. Wouldn't you be? She said, lifting her chin. I don't know you. I don't know what you expect. Damien studied her for a long moment. Then softly, what I expect is what's in the contract. Nothing more. He stepped closer. She didn't move. Then something happened. He reached up, gently, almost hesitantly, and touched her cheek. It wasn't rough or rushed. It was a whisper of a touch, one that startled her more than any demand might have. His eyes searched hers, and in that moment something flickered behind them. Uncertainty, sorrow, the edge of something broken. Then he pulled away, fast, almost as if the contact had burned him. This was a mistake. What was? She asked, breathless. This arrangement. The physical part, at least. It's not necessary. You're changing the rules? No, just reevaluating. He moved to the door but paused when she said his name. Why did you really want this marriage, Damien? It wasn't just about the money. He didn't turn around. The silence stretched. Get some rest, he said finally, and was gone. But Liana couldn't sleep. Not with the echo of his touch on her skin. Not with the knowledge that whatever this arrangement truly was, it had just shifted into something far more dangerous. 3 weeks passed in a rhythm Liana hadn't chosen, but had no choice but to endure. Damien kept his distance, and she kept hers. He was rarely home during the day, and when he was, he remained cloistered in his West Wing office, or pacing the house with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in clipped tones about offshore accounts, research grants, and investor relations. Clara Voss drifted through the halls like a shadow, always watching, always present, offering just enough civility to remind Liana she was a tolerated guest, not a wife. What unsettled her most wasn't the silence, but the sense that the house was holding its breath. There were no family photos, no laughter in the halls, no past, no warmth. Just echoes, artfully arranged furniture, and the cold stare of floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the lake like a prison cell. It wasn't until she stumbled upon the music room that something inside her began to thaw. She found it tucked behind heavy oak doors near the end of the east wing, a forgotten chamber lined with faded velvet drapes and a magnificent Steinway grand piano coated in a fine layer of dust. The moment her fingers brushed the keys, she knew, perfectly in tune. Someone had maintained the instrument, even if no one had played it in years. She sat, she played, first softly, uncertain, then with rising confidence. Chopin, Debussy, a piece she'd composed in college that no one had ever heard. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like a contract or a burden. She felt like herself. You play beautifully. Liana's hands froze mid-phrase. Damien stood at the doorway, half in shadow, dressed in a black sweater and slacks. No suit jacket, no armor. His voice was quieter than usual, lacking its typical sharpness. I didn't know anyone was listening, she said, gently lowering the piano lid. I wasn't, he replied, not at first. He stepped into the room as if testing the floor beneath his feet. My mother used to play this piano. This room was hers. Liana blinked, surprised by the personal detail. Was she a professional? She could have been. She taught at Juilliard before she married my father. A flicker of something passed over his face. Nostalgia, maybe, or regret. I taught music too, Liana offered, unsure why she was filling the silence. Not at Juilliard, just a high school in Portland. Damien nodded once. I know. Of course he did. He lingered by the windows, staring out at the lake, arms folded. For a moment, she saw him not as the calculating man who'd bought her future, but as someone haunted, someone who, like her, had stopped letting light into their life. You can use this room anytime, he said after a pause. The piano shouldn't stay silent. That night, a leather-bound book appeared on her bed. Chopin, rare manuscripts, no note, no signature. But she didn't need one. The next morning, Liana bundled herself in a down parka from the closet and ventured into the snow-covered grounds. The chill bit at her skin, but after weeks of confinement it was a welcome sensation. She wandered toward the dormant gardens, boots crunching softly over the frost. Near the greenhouse, an older man in a knit cap and wool coat was shoveling snow from a stone path. He looked up when she approached. His lined face split into a genuine smile. Morning, Mrs. Cole, she returned the smile. Good morning. Name's Henry Mercer, he said, offering a gloved hand. Groundskeeper here for, 30 years now. Worked for Mr. Cole's father. You must know the family well, then. Well enough, he said, his voice careful. She hesitated, then asked, Did you know someone named Rebecca? The change in his expression was immediate. His jaw tightened, shovel stilling. Miss Rebecca was Mr. Balt Damien's sister. Beautiful girl. Played piano like a dream, lot like her mama. What happened to her? Henry hesitated. She passed. About 7 years ago now. Heart condition. He picked up the shovel again, his tone growing brisk. Excuse me, ma'am. Storm's coming. Got to clear the paths before it freezes again. As he walked away, the wind picked up, slicing through her coat. But it wasn't the cold that made her shiver. It was the way he'd avoided her eyes. The way he'd said, past. Like it was something shameful, something buried. Later that day, back inside the mansion, she found herself drawn to the library. She searched for anything, photos, journals, something personal, But the shelves were filled with sterile business texts, legal volumes, and investor reports. It was as if the family's history had been erased, scrubbed clean like fingerprints from glass. But Liana knew better. Secrets didn't disappear. They were just hidden. And she was going to find them. It happened fast, too fast for anyone to prepare. After another tense board meeting in San Francisco, Damien exited the hotel visibly furious. Liana had never seen him like that. Lips tight, jaw clenched, his voice low and shaking as he muttered to Clara about Maxwell's leak and files that should have stayed buried. She tried to ask what was wrong, but he brushed past her, waving off the car and insisting he would drive back to Lake Revel himself, despite the worsening storm. She begged him to wait until morning. He wouldn't listen. 2 hours later, a call from a highway patrol officer shattered the silence of the suite. Damien's car had skidded off the rain-slicked cliffs near Sierra Crest. He was airlifted to St. Augustine Medical. Critical condition. Head trauma. Internal bleeding. By the time Liana reached the hospital, still wearing the dress from the gala, her hands were trembling too hard to fill out the paperwork. She sat in the sterile waiting room, numb, as the minutes became hours. Rain lashed the windows, a cruel echo of the storm inside her chest. A surgeon in bloodied scrubs appeared just after dawn. "Your husband is stable," he said. "We controlled the bleeding, but the subdural hematoma is serious. The next 24 hours are crucial. We won't know the extent of the damage until he wakes up, if he wakes up." The weight of those words sent her collapsing into the nearest chair. She hadn't even realized she was crying until a nurse handed her a tissue. She stayed by his side in the ICU, unmoving. He looked impossibly still, stripped of his power and precision, bandaged and broken beneath the soft hiss of machines. The monitor beside him blinked steadily, the only proof he was still with her. "You need to wake up," she whispered, gripping his hand in both of hers. "There's too much I don't understand, too much you haven't told me." The door opened, and Clara stepped in, disheveled, pale, her blouse wrinkled and makeup streaked from tears. But her voice was sharp. "This is your fault," she said. Liana didn't turn. "What are you talking about?" He was unraveling. "Ever since you arrived, you pushed him." "I overheard you," Liana said, standing. "At the gala, you and Maxwell, talking about leaked documents, undermining Damien. That wasn't about me." Clara's eyes widened, then narrowed just as fast. "You don't know what you've stepped into." Before Liana could respond, a nurse entered to check Damien's vitals. Clara backed away, murmuring something about transferring care to Damien's private physician. But Liana wasn't leaving. She couldn't. Hours passed. Liana sat by Damien's bed, her eyes dry but burning. When she finally drifted into a half-sleep, she was startled awake by a soft knock. "Mrs. Cole?" A tall man with kind eyes entered, holding a clipboard. "I'm Dr. Ellis Reed. Damien and I were roommates at Harvard. I flew in as soon as I heard." He checked Damien's vitals and gently examined his pupils, murmuring reassurances as he worked. Then he paused, looking at Liana with a hesitant frown. "I didn't know he'd married." "It wasn't traditional," she said quietly. Dr. Reed hesitated again. "After Rebecca, I never thought he'd open himself to anyone. She had a congenital heart condition, needed an experimental treatment, but insurance denied it. There was a financial scandal, embezzled funds, stocks reallocated. By the time they traced it back, the money was gone. So was her chance." Liana felt her stomach twist. "My father was blamed for that." Reed nodded slowly. "Jonathan Wren, Damien trusted him, hired him on Maxwell's recommendation. But after the investigation, Damien never mentioned him again." As Dr. Reed left the room, Liana reached into Damien's jacket, still draped over the chair. In the inside pocket, she found a small USB drive. Damien stirred, his lips parting. "Keep it safe," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "Don't trust," he coughed, pain flashing through his face. "I've got it," Liana said, clutching the drive. "Rest." Later that night, back at the hotel, Liana plugged the drive into her laptop. What she found stole her breath, hundreds of financial records with her father's name stamped across them. But something felt off. The dates didn't line up. Some transactions were dated after her father's supposed confession. Others bore his signature, but not his handwriting. Liana, a music teacher trained to recognize the most subtle patterns, saw the irregularities at once. It was deliberate, staged. Her father had been framed. With shaking hands, she copied the files to a separate drive and placed the original in the hotel safe. She didn't know yet who had orchestrated the lie, but she had enough to blow it wide open. "For my father," she whispered to the dark, "or Rebecca, and for the man who risked everything chasing justice." Because no matter what Damien had done, she knew this. He had never stopped trying to protect the people he loved, even if it meant destroying himself in the process. Morning light seeped through the blinds of Damien's hospital room as Liana sat beside him, files scattered across her lap. His breathing had steadied overnight, the tension in his brow easing slightly, but he remained asleep, a shadow of the man who had once moved through boardrooms with storm-like certainty. She studied the forged documents again, her fingers tracing timelines and signatures that didn't match, an inconsistency others might have missed, but not her. Not someone who lived and breathed pattern, rhythm, and structure. A low voice startled her. "What are you doing?" Liana looked up. Damien was awake, eyes bloodshot but sharp, trying to sit up. She rushed to his side, placing a hand on his shoulder to stop him from straining. "You're awake," she whispered. "You shouldn't move. You're still healing." "Answer me." She hesitated, then gathered the papers. Trying to understand what really happened 7 years ago. These records don't add up. His eyes narrowed as he focused on the sheets. "Why does it matter to you now?" "Because I ended up in this marriage, because of a lie," she said. "Because my father's name was dragged through the mud. And I think you know he wasn't the villain." He didn't respond at first, just stared at her as though she were a language he was only beginning to translate. Finally, his voice came, rough and quiet. "When I arranged this, it was about retribution. I believed your father had destroyed my family, my sister. I wanted someone to answer for that. You were collateral. And now? I don't know." He looked away, ashamed. "You've become something else." The door opened abruptly. Clara entered and froze when she saw him awake. Her eyes flicked to the papers in Liana's hands. "What are those doing here?" she demanded. Damien didn't flinch. "Liana found inconsistencies in the Wren investigation. We're looking into it." The case was closed. That evidence was airtight. "Was it?" Liana challenged, standing. "Because I've found multiple transfers authorized after my father supposedly confessed, and the approval signatures don't match." "You're out of your depth," Clara snapped. "What else did you find?" Damien asked, ignoring Clara's outburst. Liana flipped to a marked page. "Here, these transactions continued for 8 days after my father's access was supposedly revoked. Either someone forged his credentials, or someone let it happen. Someone with administrative privileges," Damien said flatly, "like my uncle." Clara's face went pale. "This is absurd," she said, but her voice had lost its bite. "Maxwell has been loyal to this company since its founding. He also spent years planting doubts about my leadership," Damien countered. "And he's the one who recommended I hire Jonathan Wren." Liana's heart pounded. Where would your father have kept records, personal ones, something he wouldn't trust to the company? Damien's eyes flicked to her. "There's a study at the Ravel estate. Locked. You'll need a key. It's in my desk. Take Henry with you. He was my father's right hand. He'll know where to look." Liana nodded, already reaching for her coat. Damien caught her wrist gently before she could leave. "When this is over," he said softly, "we need to talk about what this marriage really is now." She held his gaze. "I know." At Lake Ravel, the wind howled through the trees as Henry led her into a room she'd never seen. Dusty, untouched, but filled with life. Rebecca's sheet music stacked on the piano, notes scribbled in a code only someone like Liana would recognize. Henry watched her closely as she flipped through the scores. "She used to hide things in the music," he said, "clues, messages." And there it was. Declare de Lune. Underneath the staff in faint graphite. Uncle M. P.O. Box, blackmail. Liana's breath caught. "We need to check the old boathouse." Inside the hidden storage safe beneath the floorboards, they found a thumb drive and a sealed letter addressed to Damien in Rebecca's delicate handwriting. Liana opened the files, her hands trembling. Video footage. Maxwell, standing in Jonathan Wren's office. "You'll confess," Maxwell snarled, "or your son loses his scholarship. Your wife's treatments vanish. Your daughter, she'll be the one to watch it all fall apart." Jonathan's voice, weary but resolute, answered, "I'll do it. Just leave them alone." Rebecca's letter was worse. beautiful, heartbreaking, filled with guilt that she'd discovered her uncle's betrayal too late. She'd planned to confront him after her surgery, but the treatment was pulled. The surgery never happened. "Maxwell let her die," Liana whispered, "to protect the lie." Just then, Mrs. Reynolds called. "They're searching Damien's office," she said, breathless. "Maxwell knows." Liana ran, Henry pushing her toward the car. "Go. Get back to the hospital. He'll try to silence this." Back in the city, traffic was a blur. Her phone buzzed Harold. "Be careful," he warned. "They're sending someone after you." She reached the hospital's garage just as rain began to fall again, fat and heavy. A figure stepped from behind a pillar. "Clara." "Give me the drive," Clara said calmly. Liana clutched it tighter. "You were in on it from the beginning." "Maxwell promised me everything Damien denied me. Position, power, respect. But he never gave you love," Liana said. "And that's why you lost." Behind her, Maxwell's voice boomed. "Enough of this." He stepped into view, flanked by two men. "You're too late," Liana said. "The truth is out." Then a second voice echoed through the garage, weak but fierce. "Not yet." Damien appeared, leaning heavily on Dr. Reed. "But it will be." FBI agents moved in seconds later, flashing badges. Maxwell tried to run. He didn't get far. In the aftermath, Damien sat beside Liana as the truth unfolded to the world. Maxwell arrested, Jonathan's name cleared, Rebecca's foundation funded in full. Damien reached into his pocket and pulled out a box. "This ring isn't for a contract," he said. "It's a question." Liana smiled through tears. "I choose you, not the billionaire. Just you." And in the soft light of the Ravel estate, as music once again filled the halls, two wounded hearts finally healed. Together. At its heart, this story is about the power of truth, healing, and the courage it takes to break free from the past. Liana entered a marriage bound by obligation and surrounded by deception. Yet through patience, empathy, and determination, she uncovered not just the truth about her father's innocence, but the layers of pain hidden inside Damien's guarded world. She taught us that silence can carry as much weight as words, and that true strength lies not in control or revenge, but in forgiveness and vulnerability. Damien, once consumed by grief and blinded by anger, learned that love is not something to be bargained for or forced. It's something that grows when walls are broken down and honesty is allowed in. And together, they prove that even the deepest wounds can heal when people are willing to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. This isn't just a story about clearing a name or unraveling a conspiracy. It's about choosing love over pride, courage over comfort, and purpose over bitterness. It's about how two people, scarred by different kinds of loss, found redemption not just in justice, but in each other. Now we'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another powerful story like this one. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to share more unforgettable journeys with you.